I guess we're ready to begin.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Engineering Equipment Committee of the Vallecitos Water District for Monday, July 12th at 3 p.m. via teleconference. And I'll go ahead and read this paragraph to the public. Due to the evolving situation with COVID-19 novel coronavirus, so long as state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing measures, Vallecitos Water District will hold future meetings via teleconferencing and allow members of the public to observe and address the meeting telephonically or otherwise electronically. During this period of time, Vallecitos Water District will not be making any physical location available for members of the public to observe the meeting and offer public comment. The public is encouraged to watch and participate in the meeting from the safety of their homes. The meeting can be viewed on the agenda page located on the main page of the district's website. Public comments or questions can be submitted to the following email address, publiccomment@vwd.org. All written comments that are received at least 90 minutes before the meeting will be provided to the committee members, and a record of the receipt of the comment will be noted during the meeting. Members of the public viewing the meeting via the Zoom video conferencing platform can express their desire to provide input at the appropriate time by utilizing the raise hand function. Additional instructions for online participation will be posted on the district's website, www.vwd.org/meetings. Okay, and with that, I'll turn over the agenda to you, James.
Great, thank you. So our first item, I believe, is the HouseAids. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully everybody can see the HouseAids, the approval escrow account for water and capital facilities, correct?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I brought this item to the committee, maybe it was last month. Basically, this HouseAids has two phases, phase one, phase two. The owner in phase one, which is less units, basically entered an escrow agreement. The reason for the escrow agreement is because with all development with our ordinance, they don't have to pay capacity fees until prior to occupation. The county requires a commitment of water service up front. So for them to get a commitment of water service, that's basically a defined commitment. They have to pay their, in this case, water only capacity fees. So the project wasn't fully approved by the county at the time. So we entered into a compromise. We entered into an escrow agreement with the developer. And that escrow agreement basically allowed them about 4 years, I believe, to basically get into development and get to the point where they're paying capacity fees. However, it didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen was because their phase two project and phase one project, even though they're two separate phases and two separate approvals through the county, the development really is going to do all the grading at once. It's the only way they can afford to do so. So no work's going to be done on phase one until phase two has been approved by the county. So working with the developer, we try to provide them another escrow agreement with a defined date. And that's what we came back to the Engineering Equipment Committee with, is this developer wants an open-ended escrow agreement where he could just keep on extending it. And it's kind of putting the district in a bad position with the county, because every time he extends it, we're signing a letter that says we are going to commit water service, when truly we wouldn't be able to. Now, we could always hold occupancies. We have other levers that we could pull, but we're basically signing a letter that says we're going to honor commitment to water service for these properties. That being said, obviously, we wouldn't provide commitment until the water is actually paid for, which is in our ordinance. So we're okay there. However, this continuing of extension of escrow agreements, when I brought it to the committee, as a reminder, the committee says we're not interested in that. They get water commitment, they pay the cap fees, and then the value of that water commitment, the capacity fee, stays with the land. So we've been working with the developer, and we finally end up working with the developer's lawyer and working with them. They understand the process a little better now. They understand why the need for a closed-end agreement, and they've actually agreed to it. So we're looking at combining the phase one and phase two escrow agreement into one new escrow agreement. And the only thing left is the time. And so the only thing really left for in discussion here is the amount of time. So what they're asking for is a 6-year agreement to finish phase one and phase two. We don't think that's unreasonable. 6 years is a little bit longer than staff's comfort level. Our normal construction agreements are, around 18 months, and we have extended them to about 3 years with special requests. So we're talking about doubling that now. Staff initially said a 4-year agreement seems to make sense to us with this project, giving phase one, phase two additional years to move forward. And really, today in concept, I think we were able to accomplish what both staff and what committee's direction, which is a closed-end escrow agreement, which in other words, at the end of the escrow agreement, the district gets the money based on the cap fees that are in place at the time. So if our cap fees go up, then there's going to be a amount due. Obviously, our current cap fee amount is deposited into the escrow. And the development gets the commitment for water service. So both sides win. We don't mind waiting a little bit, and we double check with the county. It is a true statement that the phase two project is not being approved yet. It's in process, but phase one is approved. But I do believe the developer when he says if he can't do phase two, he can't afford to do phase one because phase two is the bigger project anyway. You can kind of see from the mapping, phase two encompasses the majority of this area here and around our existing tanks. Phase one is just this northerly portion. So really today is just a discussion. If there's any feel for whether 6 years unreasonable, staff is more than willing to just stick with the 4-year. If 6 years seems reasonable, considering it is a 2-phase project, then 6 years is okay. It's at the kind of it's higher than any type of other agreement that we've done in the past. We've done things for mainly 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, and 3 years. So now we're pushing double of what we've done in the past when it comes to kind of a construction type agreement. So with that, it's kind of open to the committee for discussion. So unless you have, I'd be happy to answer questions, or we could just basically discuss what the committee feels about the escrow and the actual 4 or 6 year terms. Director Hernandez.
Well, whether it's 4 or 6, I appreciate. The fact is that he could pay all of the, because in the next 6 years, I got to believe we're going to be raising the capacity fees. I mean, they've raised them twice in the 10 years I've been here. So, but he could, before we raised them, he could actually say, okay, close the escrow, pay all the fees, and then we'd be happy and county would be happy. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. So, and he's going to pay whatever fees are in place.
Right.
At the time. So we, for escrow, we collect our current fees, but if the fees go up 10%, then he'll pay that extra 10%.
But before they go up, he can say, oh, let's close the escrow.
Yes.
And he's good.
Yes.
So, I don't mind the additional couple of years. It is a big ass project. It's lingered around our district for lots of years. So if we can get this thing going and it's virtually money in the bank, then I think that's a good thing for the district personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, James, I don't have any particular feeling for 6 years versus 4. Just as long as it doesn't create additional problems for staff, I guess. I guess the other question I have is, I think I asked at the last committee meeting, but how many EDUs are we talking about?
Let's see. I think I have it in the staff report. Apologize. I knew it by heart at one point.
So the 19 plus 17?
Yeah, I believe, let's see. So phase 2 is 17, and phase 1, where's phase 1?
Looks like 19.
Yeah, so phase 1 is 19. So,
okay.
So that's not too many. It's a large area, because it's a large area, but it's not a lot of homes.
Right.
And if I remember, he's going to spend a couple of $1 million redoing the pipe, isn't he?
Yeah, there's if you look in here, it's new 16-inch water line.
Yeah.
That he has to put in as part of our Tres Amigos. So right now that those easements and stuff are in some of the better developable lots.
Yeah.
So he's going to have to put them in the new roads.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Director Elthar.
Yeah, I was just wondering, part of that new 16-inch water line looks like it's dead ends in a cul-de-sac. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is part of our Tres Amigos pipeline, and I know we're doing a replacement, but that's further north. So this is the main way we get water from our Twin Oaks reservoirs, or 40 and 33 million, to our North Twin Oaks tank number 2, and then we feed north there. We also have a feed that comes down from the south that is at a lower elevation, though. So I believe there is a couple dead ends to that system. And then obviously during the redesign, we'll be looking at the proper sizing. But the main 16-inch backbone runs through all the way up north, basically almost all the way to Gopher Canyon. It does change size. It gets smaller as it gets further up, but it's what we call our Tres Amigos system.
Right. I was just curious on that one in the middle there, up above the phase 1 label. It
Right
says
here?
Yeah, it says 16-inch for that short stub there. Is that really required?
No, it probably isn't. It probably is an existing 16-inch that it was meant to be extended. But when the development comes in and everything gets put in the roads, we'll be putting in the proper sizes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Great. Okay, so with that, what I've heard is the committee does not mind a 6-year extension. Staff will work with our legal and their legal to bring a new escrow agreement back to the board.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Great. Okay, I think the next item is Susan's.
Yes, thank you, James. Let me share my screen here. Okay, are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Very good. Yes, so I wanted to talk with you both directors about the asset management plan, give you an update on where we are on this. And I'm going to go through and explain to you how the asset management plan differs and supports the overall asset management program, and then talk to you and get your thoughts on some of the various components of that plan. So.
And there will be a section where I'm going to help join in because I know there's been a lot of board discussion on reserves. So we're going to tie in how the asset management plan is one of the components that will make up our future reserve policies.
Okay, so this is the agenda for the presentation. As I mentioned, I'm going to cover the strategic alignment, the program versus the plan, the progression of our current asset management program activities, so you can see where we are, and talk about the plan components, which, as James mentioned, includes the components regarding the reserve and funding for asset renewal replacement, and then what the next steps are for the actual asset management plan. Quick refresher. Again, general asset management principles. These are the components of an asset management program that we work to answer, provide guidance and specificity on these different items. So, you know, what assets we have, what the condition is, remaining useful life, failure analysis, and then the capital investments that we need to be making for our assets. The asset management program aligns with the strategic plan that is in place for Vallecitos Water District, and it falls under the strategic focus area 1, infrastructure integrity, with the goal of facilities and infrastructure that are reliable, proactively maintained, adequately funded, and anticipating future demands. So strategy 1.1 is for asset management. This is what was developed and put in place now that we have the asset management program and an asset management department. We're working on the maintenance management system, GIS, and again, really just working to ensure that the assets are adequately maintained and replaced most cost effectively. And strategy 2 specifically calls that out, the replacement schedule. So the metrics for success are fewer service interruptions, financial and rate stability, and maintenance that's proactive, ultimately reducing overtime and also allowing us to have the appropriate staffing levels and know what that should be. Okay, so how do you differentiate from the program from the plan? And generally speaking, the asset management program is really just business practices. It's a body of knowledge. It's internationally established. We've gone over that previously here in the engineering committee, what that international standards are. And that's what the program is based upon, these international standards, which have the goal of minimizing the total life cycle cost of ownership, meeting required levels of service at the identified investment level. A program really brings together IT, finance, engineering, maintenance, operations, all working together to approach the management of our assets in a very specific and best business practices manner. So how does that differ from the plan? The plan is actually a tactical report which helps define how we'll accomplish that, how the program will meet its goals. It will look specifically at the assets that we own, what the condition is, and what's required to maintain those assets so that we can meet the objectives of an asset management program. But it's a very specific tactical report which lays out requirements for funding, what type of maintenance needs to occur, and defines that for all the assets that we have here at Vallecitos. And one thing to note, it's a complementary document to the master plan. The master plan that we have in place here is primarily looking at planning that's needed to ensure capacity is available to us as we increase the development in the area, as we just heard about. That's what the master plan looks at. The asset management plan looks at the existing assets that we already have in place at the district. So where are we on our progression for the asset management program? This is generally, we look at this as a 3-year effort for implementation. These are at the bottom here are the different components, different aspects of the program that are important for us to successfully implement. And then we'll be able to move into this green area, which is actually performing asset management as a business practice. You can see here, we've made great progress, I think, in the last 18 months, increased our percent complete on quite a few items in this 3-year effort, and we'll continue to do that. And the biggest factor to reaching our goals of performance is going to be the creation of this asset management plan. The items in red down here are just highlighted items that are part of what the asset management plan will provide for us. Those things that I just talked about: risk exposure assessment, level of service, and then the rehab replacement schedule with its associated funding requirements. Okay, so what I wanted to talk with you then in more detail about were the components of the asset management plan. This is just an example, little screenshot from an asset inventory. We have our asset inventory. We're in very good shape on knowing exactly what we have and where it is. So this is an example showing, you know, what kind of pipes. This isn't Vallecitos, it's just a snapshot. So again, primary component of the asset management plan is to document that. Additionally, the asset management plan, which can vary from it, well, it does vary from district to industry type. It varies from different countries implement asset management plans. The reports look different. And that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at and talking with the board about is what areas, components of our focus areas for us in this asset management plan. So one of the big ones that we'll want to look at is the level of service. Now we can just use what's already defined as level of service. for the district, or we could explore expanding on that more. So this is just an example. Certainly it would be one that we would have as well, high customer satisfaction, you know, and then defining what the objectives are, and then what are the metrics used here at the district to ensure that we are providing the level of service that our customers require. Another component, as I had mentioned, was business risk exposure. Again, this is assigning a probability of asset failure and consequent of asset failure to the actual assets. And you can either go to the specific asset level or keep it at the asset class level. We've done this, as you've seen, for the pipelines, for the water pipelines already. We've looked at the ductile iron and assigned this. And so we'll continue to, as a component of the plan, expand this out. Okay, a critical part of the asset management plan, and really what its main focus and main goals are to understand the funding levels that we need to have in order to ensure our assets are being maintained and replaced. So that is the asset replacement funding planning. Currently in Vallecitos, our asset valuation is $370 million is the value, the current book value, if you will, the book value of our assets, and the book value replacement cost using the ENR, the Engineering News Report methodologies. And this is from our CAFR, the CAFR that was published in 2019, and also it's in the budget documents. The current asset replacement cost is $776 million to replace our assets.
Let me add a little bit to that too. And one of the big discrepancies in the price, because a lot of times we're asked why are these numbers, why they diverge so much, is because a majority of our district is actually built through development. And when you condition development, they're building, majority. If you think about like a San Leo Hills, it's raw land. There's no streets. There's mass grading going on. It's non-prevailing wage, and they're installing the pipe, installing our facilities. When we go to replace a facility, we have existing customers that we have to keep in service. We have existing street sections. We have to highline people. We're paying prevailing wage. The work is going to be much slower. You can't mass grade. We have to keep traffic control open. It adds a significant amount of cost. Basically it's more than doubling the cost of the project. So this, obviously, I'm going to tie this into kind of what we look like when we're looking at different pressures and different metrics on how we look at reserves also. Susan, I know the next couple slides are mine, but go ahead and talk about the useful life and then from our asset inventory, the age.
Okay, will do. So again, the asset replacement cost, yeah, and that's based upon an accounting figure for when those assets are anticipated to be replaced. Currently, it looks out at about 70 years. So this is the planned useful life, not condition-based, just used for accounting purposes to come up with these numbers. Pipelines are planned to last 50 to 70 or more years. Mechanical assets that are for water are about 20 or more years, and sewers less, 10 or more years, because it takes more wear and tear on the sewer side. One thing to note here on this pipeline, you can see here that many of our pipeline assets, and this is just the water side, but you can see that they're getting 30 years or more in age. And although we do have a significant amount of younger pipe, 11 to 20 years, I just do want to point out that that's the ductile iron, which we have had some premature failures with. So that's where sometimes using this age-based methodologies for renewal and replacement planning can really be misleading as to what's needed. So that's just something to be aware of as we're looking at doing the plan to get more accurate representation of our assets.
Okay, so I don't want to scare the committee. The next few slides are just examples. So they're not reality. And what these are kind of a snapshot, but this is something that the asset management plan, working with our finance group, is going to produce. It's going to produce a kind of a replacement schedule of what you need to replace over the course of 50, 70, 100 years. So in theory, you're replacing 100% of your assets. Or if you just use a life cycle cost analysis, and you're basically replacing everything over that 70 plus years. Obviously, your sewer system, not the pipelines, but the pumps and everything. You're replacing it every 10 plus years. The water system, the pumps and equipment, you're replacing every 20 plus years, and the pipelines are lasting a lot longer. So go ahead and talk just about what the slide is showing a little bit, Susan.
Yep, sure. So this is a comparison of the replacement needs versus what may be in the reserves, the floor, and the ceiling for a reserve policy. The yellow bars are representing the age-based assessment of when replacements would occur. The pink fuchsia is more of a condition-based look. Again, these are just examples, but it does demonstrate that if we look at and include the condition beyond just the age-based, it will give us a more accurate look. It may even smooth out the requirements for the reserves, although you can see still that the reserves are needed in order to ensure that we have adequate funding as the renewal and replacements of these assets as we come along age-wise. So
yeah, and you can see that, if you're looking just purely on the age base, you have years that you're replacing 40, 50, 60, 80 million dollars worth. I mean, obviously that's not sustainable, but just based on pure age base, you're looking at a huge reserve requirement. You'd have to build up reserves tremendously high if you look at those big peaks in yellow, just to get through that without hitting the floor. So why don't we move on to the next slide?
Yep.
Okay,
now
so
go ahead,
go ahead.
James.
No. So this is, again, a theoretical slide. It's not based on what we're doing here at Vallecitos, but it does give a pretty good impression. If you use the example, if we have 80 to $100 million in the bank, to the average person, that sounds like a tremendous amount of money. But when you have $776 million of assets that need replacement, it really isn't that much. You could basically see that if with $80 million to $100 million in bank and your floor at roughly $40 million, you would need, even if you're putting $2-3 million of reserves every year into the system, you would be negative over the course of your asset life, about $3 million a year. So in essence, your reserves would hit the floor. And obviously, if you didn't do anything and take out loans or raise rates, it just keep on going down and down and down. And in some of the worst case scenarios, obviously these is theoretical, it wouldn't happen. You'd be in the negative $650 million range. And then, so why don't you go over what the different color lines mean and how they change? And again, this is theoretical and this is a snapshot. The good news is we do a lot of good things here at Vallecitos that we already extend our useful life of our assets. But the bad news is this is a static example. We're building new assets every year because we're still growing. So that asset inventory is just getting bigger, and so is your asset liability. So Susan, why don't we go over the different examples, and then I'm going to make a couple more points on it.
Sure. So these different lines represent maybe different scenarios about how we are, or how a district or how an asset owner could be maintaining their assets. If they strictly went age-based, it's a fairly straight line, still going into a deficit on the reserves. Another way to possibly do your renewal and replacement planning is strictly condition-based. That's the orange line, which is right there running along the years. It's fairly flat and not a lot of ups and downs and spikes. But again, that's if the condition is being continuously maintained as we go through time. The gray line is, again, just examples of failing to do significant CIP investment. Certainly that is not the case here at Vallecitos, but certain other asset owning agencies may try to take that approach to address their maybe reserves or rate needs. And what happens is, you can see over time, it initially seems that, oh, our reserve funding is getting stronger and stronger, but there comes a time that your assets become so old and they fail to function, and you just kind of fall off a cliff, and then suddenly you're spending a tremendous amount of money, probably, as this example shows, more than if you would have just maintained things going along. So that is not a good approach to maintaining your assets. And lastly, the yellow line is maybe how, if you just did deferred maintenance, and again, maybe you draw down your reserves some and then they pop back up. It's not a planned approach to maintaining your assets. It's not looking holistically at the different ways that you can maintain them. You need to have the CIP, deferred maintenance, maintenance has to occur, and you really have to look at the asset classes as a whole, and through an asset management plan, be defining it. And that's just sort of what the little red line is, the ideal scenario, where you actually are continuously planning and adjusting based on the various factors that come into play for the performance of your assets.
So as you know, as the committee members know, there's been a lot of discussion. This is just one component. So when the asset management plan is done, it does not shape the final reserve policy that the board will adopt, but it will be one of the metrics, and not only one of the metrics that's like our credit rating, our days in cash. Those are all metrics that we use with industry standards, but this will be a metric of the demand that's shown over time from our plan, and it could be adjusted as our asset management plan and the program is underway, so we can see where we need to build reserves up and where those reserves are coming. Now, we already do some of that, but this is now a more defined plan instead of just a 5-year to 10-year CIP projection. Because you have to remember, a lot of our CIP right now is still growth-based CIP coming out of development. In the future, a lot of our CIP will be replacement-based CIP. We've already seen a mixture of that replacement CIP coming in, and we're going to be transitioning. It might take 15 or 20 more years until we're really a maintenance type district, or maybe even longer. So, and anytime you get below our floor, there's going to be some demand, whether it's a rate demand or a loan, which also is a rate demand indirectly. There's going to be a demand on the system. So you can see, if without the prudent planning, your numbers will never get down here in reality. You would end up raising rates, taking out loans to keep us solvent and above that line, whatever that line is, whether it's the floor or whether it's zero. But having somewhere around $80 million in the bank when you're looking at $776 million, it's a perspective issue. If you look at it like this, that $80 million in the bank looks really robust. But even in our budget, it shows a big drawdown coming out. And our budget really only looks at it goes out to 20 years, but really only is looking at 10 years. When you start looking at our actual asset from a common sense standpoint, the numbers are even more stark. It's more reality of how that $80 million sits compared to our asset life and our asset valuation. Now, that being said, this is just a snapshot. We earn interest on that money. We already do a combination of deferred maintenance and asset life cycle cost analysis. So what the plan does is take us from where we are right now, which is kind of we do a good job of asset management, but we do it in an unstructured way, to a long-term plan that looks at it from a structured way, that has a decision matrix of where we do our cost benefit and how we make those decisions to make the right decision on what assets to replace at what time. I think about it as, owning, like a car. At some point, you can run that car and you can keep on doing maintenance on it. At some point it's the right time to just replace it. While on the sewer side of things, it's like running a car that's really not that our sewer system is unreliable, but a system that requires lots of maintenance, and it's a work truck. You're constantly using it. You constantly have to maintain it. And guess what? At about 10 years, it's done. A water system is lasting longer, and evidently our pipelines are cars you could keep for your whole life. So, they require minimum maintenance, but they're very expensive to replace. So I just wanted to give the committee a sense of this. We're going to work with IT and do a similar presentation. No, sorry, not IT. We're going to work with finance and do a similar presentation, either to the whole board or to the finance committee, to also give them a flavor of the kind of this side of the house and where that input is and what those numbers look like. Obviously, the numbers will get, there'll still be examples, but we'll refine them a little bit. We're not going to try and get into our interest earnings and how we move cash around and everything else with that, because it gets a lot more complicated. Because the asset management plan really is a replacement spending plan. We have to replace this. When we plan it out, we can extend our asset lives, which is going to save the district hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of our asset life. So these aren't $1 million savings, $100,000 savings. The plan and the reason we're doing this is, if properly managed, it could save hundreds of millions of dollars to our ratepayers over the course of that time. Now, it's a big, long time, and that's why the number's so big, but that's because our assets last so long. If improperly managed, you could see the consequences would be quite a lot of pressure on both loans and rates, which is also rates. So, Susan, go ahead.
So what are our next steps? So James did mention a couple of things that we want to be doing, getting in front of finance. With regard to the asset management plan, which will be a RFP out to consultants who do these sorts of plans. It's, again, pretty standardized internationally, what's in them. But again, we'll be having workshops is our goal, is to have workshops with the board to really finalize these different components. There's certain aspects of it we can prioritize where we want the consultants to spend their time and effort. Certainly the financial part is critical, but there's other components. So we want to get input from the board where we need to focus our efforts. Then we'll be releasing the RFP, selecting the consultant, board approval, and then we will initiate the asset management plan development. We do, as we've talked about before, that the overall asset management program implementation was about a 3-year effort. We're about 18 months in. We'll see how long the asset management plan development would take. We're thinking maybe 6 to 8 months. Hard to say because it'll depend on the components. But we do have budget for this. It's already a CIP. It has been for a couple of years now. So we have budget, adequate budget to cover the asset management plan. And really, we look forward to working with the board to get their input on what components they'd really like to see and the outcome and the deliverables that are really important for the board as they go forward making their decisions. So any questions? Or James, if you'd like to add anything.
No, I think that's good. The committee members, do you have any questions? I know we gave you a lot of information on this.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Back on that slide where you had the 3 columns, and the farthest right-hand columns was the number of breaks per 100, the number of something else per 100.
Going backing up, that's
A couple more.
The goals.
One, yeah. Again, another one. One more.
There you
Right.
go.
Yeah, the level of one forward. One more forward.
Or 2.
No, the goals and right.
Okay, level of service.
Level of service. Number of water quality complaints 1 per 100. Number of breaks 10 per 100. When this is given out, could we find out how we're rating per 100?
Yeah,
we have an idea.
Yeah, we already have that information. Matter of fact, it's the board already gets it in the operational reports. That's I don't know if that's monthly or quarterly, So all these numbers are already in, the board already receives it in Ed's report that I think it may come out quarterly. I'm not too sure. So you already have that number. And of course, we'll be using our real numbers. And just so you know, our real numbers exceed the industry average. And then they far exceed the industry average as far as from a good side, not from a bad side. And they even exceed the local industry average. So we're in good shape. And when we actually get in front of the board, whether it's a workshop or through committees, we'll have those numbers. We'll talk about where we are. And then really, it's about where do we want to spend the effort. If we're already a gold standard on something, what's the level of effort to be a platinum standard on that? And is it going to be worth it? Because like a lot of things, getting, to a 90, 95, 98 percentile, it takes a decent amount of average, but to get that 2, 3, 4, 5% more takes a Herculean effort and the money that goes along with it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Great.
All right. Unless there's any questions, Director Elthorp, we can move on to the next item.
Yeah, real quick, just had a question. Are we, I think the board has talked about it in the past, but are we looking at doing a revision to our reserve policy soon? I think it kind of ties in with the debt financing that we're going to be doing pretty soon, but it would seem to me like the asset management plan needs would, like has been mentioned in this presentation, kind of feed into that reserve policy.
Yeah, the reserve policies is on the schedule to be evaluated here pretty soon. The asset management plan because this is the spending and the financial, requirement for replacement schedule is one of the last things of the asset management. It's one of the final outputs, unfortunately. So it's not going to be ready for a number of years or maybe a couple of years. It definitely won't be ready in time if the board's going to do something this fiscal year with doing the reserve, but that still is okay because we still have a lot of industry standards. This is just to give a perspective because there's been talk about lowering the ceiling of the reserves, and then but then that's going to put more pressure on rates in the future. Is basically what we're looking at. So there's and the general public wouldn't understand that because they're not looking at asset replacement over a 70+ year period. They're just looking at, we have $80 million in reserves and, our next door neighbors have $50 million in reserves or something to that aspect. So this is going to be an input. It won't be the defining reason for, or the defining document for a reserve policy, but it's going to be one of the major metrics that the reserve policy uses in the quiver of metrics. There's the GAAP, the government accounting standards, there's industry standards, there's the Fitch ratings and S&P ratings. So all those things they'll have to take into consideration. So I believe the reserve policy is moving forward. We're going to get this in front of the finance committee so they have an understanding that this is on the heels, and most likely it may or may not, I don't know, depending on where we end up with a reserve policy, have us as staff and hopefully the board looking at the reserve policy again once we get the asset management plan done. But the asset management plan itself, even though a lot of the work is going to be done, it's not going to be ready next fiscal year, or definitely by the end of this fiscal year, maybe sometime next fiscal year at the earliest with this number.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I guess maybe as a minimum, it can show kind of orders of magnitude of the effect on needed reserves.
Yeah, and unfortunately, those examples that show those negative 500 million, those are big, scary numbers. But in reality, we are already doing asset management. We are already extending useful life. So one of the things the plan does is tell you really where you are now, and then it gives you that so you see what that gap is. How much gap do we have to make up, and where do we make that up? Do we make that up? How do we run more efficiently to close that gap? And is it possible?
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Susan, if you'll stop sharing, I'll go ahead. When you're ready, Director Althep, I'll share the next one.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I believe the next one is Sunrise Oryx. Okay, can everybody see the Sunrise Oryx map here or figure?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so this one has been in front of the committee at least once or twice, I think twice now. And just as a quick reminder, it's at the edge of our district along Barham. Escondido is in the clear white here. This hatched area is a sewer only area. And then the water district is on, I guess, the north and the west side of this dark line. So this is a development with roughly 190, 192 multifamily units. And one of the things that has been discussed is conditioning of a pipeline extension, roughly 860 feet along Barham Road. So we discussed on 2 occasions about upsizing and cost of upsizing and possible reimbursement. So the last meeting that we had with the committee told staff to go kind of refine the numbers because we had general numbers that we're showing, kind of we rounded it, make sure we get the numbers right and come back with kind of a recommendation from staff to committee. So I worked with a little bit with the developer, and I believe the developer's consultant CCI is in attendance today. We also worked with Escondido some more. We talked to Escondido on a couple different occasions, refined their numbers, got kind of assurances of what they're looking for, and coming back. So now, that being said, this is the same sheet that I showed at the last meeting. Let me just go over it again. The development total capacity fees, it's sewer only, is for 143.6 EDUs. So they have more units, but the way we charge it, if a multifamily unit uses less water and produces less sewer than a single family home, so it's a percentage. So even though they have 192 units, I believe it equates to 143.6 EDUs. Our current charge for that for sewer EDU is $13,000 and change. That's $1.877 million, 100% to Vallecitos. If the development were to go to Escondido, Escondido charges their $7,500 per unit. It doesn't matter whether it's a home or a condo. Escondido would want $1.44 million or 91.8% of the cap fees. And Vallecitos would be left with $437,000 or 8.2% of the cap fees. So we'd collect 8.2% of the cap fees. Escondido will be suing them, but then we'd still be responsible for all those units as far as from a customer base. They'd be our customers. Working with the development's engineer, they came up with both the sewer, it's an estimated cost, an engineer's estimate for the 8-inch, and if we were upsized to 10-inch. And they also came with the capacity difference between the pipes based on the pipe running at design capacity, which is for that size pipe is half full. So reimbursement per our ordinance is just the difference. It's roughly $36,000, call it $37,000. Obviously, it's based on a bid price and for materials and not the labor, so the number could fluctuate. But so this is just an estimate. Option 2 was capacity difference. So basically, the capacity difference, if we were to basically look at the 10-inch pipe and provide 45% because it's a larger capacity, it's not per our ordinance, but in this case, it's a little different because we're conditioning it for the possibility of that future growth. And in the general plan, it's already shown as a possible densification in there that's not shown on our master plan. So then that would be roughly $235,400. Really straightforward capacity difference, not per ordinance, but staff could look at this and say, well, even though it's not per ordinance, it's a little bit different because we're conditioning them. It's not directly per our master plan. It's really because we know that in the general plan, they're actually conditioning a higher density in those areas, and that would sewer to us. The 8-inch may be able to handle it, may not, but this would give us I guess, insurance for that future growth. Option 3, so as you know, or as you may recall, our sewer capacity fee has 3 components. One is treatment, one is outfall, and the other one's conveyance. So in this case, obviously, there's a conveyance portion and they're upsizing that conveyance portion. So the conveyance portion, and these are numbers that have been updated. Today's number is $3,777 per EDU. So if you look at the developers portion, 143.6 EDUs times the conveyance portion only, because we still have to pay for treating them at Encina or Meadowlark, in this case Encina. We still have to pay for their portion of the outfall because we haven't built the outfall. So the conveyance portion and 45% of that, is 542,000 and change. 45% of that, because that's the increase that we're asking for, is roughly $244,000. So if you look at it, total after reimbursement, we'd be collecting $1.877 million in cap fees. We'd be reallocating $244,000 back to the developer. That's a maximum number, based on 45% back to the developer. And so we'd still end up netting $1.6 million in cap fees in that scenario. Option 4 is development versus master plan. So in the master plan, we showed 76 or 74.6 EDUs. The proposed development is 143.6 EDUs. So the difference is 69 EDUs. That's 69 EDUs. Since we still have to, for all of them, we still have to pay for treatment. We have to pay for outfall. The conveyance, though, is additional money in conveyance that we didn't expect. It's roughly $260,000. And the conveyance difference between what they're building and what they need to build is 45%. So that's $117,000 and change. So after reimbursement, looking at 1.8 million, same numbers, 1.877 minus the 117 or $1.76 million. So staff working with the developer and working between the general manager, Prum, and I, we went over this. And really option 3 is pretty straightforward for us. We could support. Option 2 we could support also, because in this case, it's a request from the district for future proofing. Option 4, definitely we could justify and support it, but we feel that option 2 and option 3 are probably more fair for this development. And the district still nets out, in this case, I didn't do the math, but it'd be that 1.877 minus the 235. But these numbers are very similar. So unless there's that was the direction from the committee to come back with kind of a little bit more clarity, a little bit more justification. And then really I'm open to questions from the committee. What we're planning on doing based on today's meeting and hopefully getting some clear direction is when the development is ready for construction agreement, this would be a standard construction agreement with a little extra language and the reimbursement. And we do work those reimbursements into our standard construction agreements. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Director Hernandez, any comments or questions?
Well, did I understand that the developer's online here with us?
The developer's consultant, yeah. And just so you know, the numbers have went up. The prior number was 202, but now I got the updated number from our cap fees. I was using kind of a plug number.
Okay.
And then I was just rounding. So the number has gone up. So if anything, I mean, granted, I'm sure the developer would love to have full reimbursement for the pipe, but if anything, better news than they saw, and they're seeing these numbers for the first time, same time as you. So they may be a little shocked by this also.
Okay. Well, do they want to have a comment here, one way or the other?
If they raise their hand, I will allow them to speak. And they raised their hand. So
okay.
Okay, I believe you could unmute yourself and speak. Hello? Jim or Matt, we can't hear you. So they're unmuted, so I think the problem may be on their end. I'm not too sure.
Okay. Well, the option 3 looks viable to me, that we're going to get a bigger pipe, if I understand.
Mhm.
That way our development in the future resolved it, and we get to keep all the capacity fees. Am I correct there as well?
Yeah, the net would be, we get 1.633 of the 1.877. So I'm kind of rolling my mouse over it. So that's option 3.
Yeah. Well, I'd be happy to spend 244 and get 1.633. So
Well, it's a lot better than collecting 1.877 and only collecting
yeah, Jim, we're
400.
trying to get you up, but do you hear us? Hello? Yeah.
Hey, we're going to get on.
Yeah, I know.
Trying.
You're trying to get on?
Supporting the 244, and it's a great solution.
Yep.
And if we can't get in, then tell them we're ready to go for this.
Okay, I'll pass that along.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. That was the developer trying to get in. He says he can't get in, but they're in agreement with the 244.
Okay. Okay. And anything else from you, Director Hernandez? I mean, so staff can support the 244 also, and obviously I think they're looking at making the August board meeting.
Okay.
And so for a construction agreement, we're working with them to get them to the board meeting and trying to make sure. I think they wanted to go on the 21st, but it's just not going to happen. But their annexation is going to move forward on the 21st, which is not. That does not have anything to do with the construction agreement. But they need to get the annexation done first prior to the construction agreement.
All right. Very good.
Yeah, I've got a question, James.
Sure.
The option 1, so would that be I guess the total after reimbursement would be the 1.877 million minus 36,702. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So option 1 is per our ordinance. It's really the pipe material difference, the larger manhole difference, and that's really about it. This is a plug number. It'd be based on the bids for those items, for those material items. And so it would fluctuate a little bit, but it probably won't go above $50,000. So that's per. And the only reason we were looking at the other options, and I know we covered this in a previous committee meeting, is in this case, the master plan isn't really driving the pipe size increase. Is we know that there is really, it's at the end of a system, and if there's any growth in that area, any small development growth, there's a good chance that they'll have to rip out the 8-inch and put in a larger pipe. So we know that that'd be very hard to do, and it would create almost a moratorium in the area where nothing could develop for sewer, at least.
Yeah, I guess my only concern is seeing enough justification not to just use the district ordinance.
Yeah. Well, that's why we wanted to bring it in front of you a couple of times, because we knew it was not standard.
Right.
So, and one of the things that is a benefit is if, they do go to Escondido and we allow it, then the district's only looking at collecting about $400,000.
Right. Okay, so it's staff generally recommends option 3. I take
Yeah, we're very comfortable with option 2 or 3. 3 was the one that came up first because it's just using a prorated portion of conveyance. We're still collecting 100% on what we would be responsible for, which is outfall and treatment. And we're just basically prorating the conveyance portion of it based on their pipeline size increase. It's definitely not another deal that we would make. This is a very unique circumstance that we had to go probably outside of my comfort zone and definitely outside the box.
Yeah, I guess I just cautioned to be prepared with arguments for why option 3 makes more sense than option 1, I guess.
Yeah, and we are, and I believe, I would assume the development would also be there to answer questions directly about the development itself.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other questions on that item?
Nope.
No, I
Okay,
don't think,
with that, we'll move forward with the committee's support of staff recommendation to move forward with a reimbursement agreement, a standard construction reimbursement agreement following option 3.
okay.
Okay, great. Let me stop sharing here.
All right.
Yep, I believe the next item, hold on, let me get to it, is, oh yeah, the next 3 items is going to be Senior Engineer Morgan. So I'll let him take the wheel here.
Okay, you guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Good afternoon, Directors Elitharp and Hernandez. Just have some quick updates on our some of our bigger projects and capital facilities. I'm going to start with district-wide solar and then move into the projects at Meadowlark. The first being the conversion to sodium hypochlorite, and then just a general miscellaneous projects update at Meadowlark. First is very exciting news with our district-wide solar PPA project. Construction has demobilized back in June. We actually received the solar permission to operate from SDG&E on June 17th and worked the last couple weeks doing some final startup and commissioning, resolving some final punch list items. There's only one real item of any significance remaining, but the system is completely 100% up and running. It's generating power, and so that's very exciting. Kenyon Energy, the solar provider, is interested in coming out from Florida to tour the facilities and see everything in completion. And we thought we could probably coordinate this with the board members and General Manager Pruitt when he gets back to arrange a ribbon cutting kind of christening ceremony for the solar system for the district. James and I would coordinate with Chris Robbins and Kenyon Energy in setting all that up and cleaning up the site, making it presentable. Right now there's some weeds growing underneath the panels that we would want to take care of and things of that nature, some housekeeping things. But we're looking at coordinating a time frame in late August to do that, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention first, and I guess if we can nail down an appropriate timeline, then we can just work towards that.
Yeah, so really quick, so the General Manager Pruitt will be taking this to the full board as an informational item to talk about scheduling the ribbon cutting. And I want to be clear, Director Hernandez, we're not going to give you a champagne bottle to hit over those panels. They're too delicate.
Come on, I've been waiting 2 years for this.
At least 2 years, I think maybe more. So,
Yeah.
but definitely it's up and running, and just now it's just planning the ceremony. But we're actually starting to receive benefit from the system. So.
Yeah, it was a long way coming and a lot of coordination there with SDG&E at the end. It was frustrating at times, but it all came together in the end, and it all worked out. Happy to see where it is today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Hey,
Yeah.
have we gotten any complaints from any neighbors?
None.
No, the good news is the Water Authority did their PPA years ago, so the neighbors are now used to looking at round tanks with a bunch of panels on top of it. So they had complaints for theirs, and we were a little worried for ours for a bit. And when we went through the CEQA process, it actually went really smooth.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've done some big projects where we got neighbors complaining about reflections off the panels. But that's good.
So that's really the first update for this project. It's winding down, and as we move forward beyond August, it'll get turned over to Susan in asset management. Terra Verde, our solar consultant, is on board to provide asset management services for all of our solar assets at the district. So this will be moving over to her desk very shortly.
So the benefiting accounts have all been set as far as what's designated to receive the benefit?
Yes, actually, we just learned a couple weeks ago that our the benefiting accounts has increased. So we actually have about 20 additional accounts, existing accounts that will benefit from this site at Twin Oaks.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
What's the maximum number? Is there a maximum number of accounts, or is it by load, or?
I don't think there's a maximum. I think it's a direct relation to the,
I thought there was. I thought it was up to 50 accounts or so. I don't quote me
Okay.
on that number, but I think there is a maximum. But
is
because
that-
of the way we're using power, we are able to add more accounts to the amount of load that we're producing at the site.
Right.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I'll move on to the next item.
Okay.
Just to give the committee an update on a critical project going on at Meadowlark is the conversion to sodium hypochlorite. Currently, the box down here, this is the chlorine building, chlorine injection building, which houses the chlorine gas cylinders currently, which goes out for injection at these 3 points at Meadowlark. This project is going to convert the chlorine gas injection to a bleach solution or sodium hypochlorite at 12.5%. We actually have been working diligently in soliciting an RFP, which we just got out last week on 2 weeks ago now, on July 2nd. To prospective consultants, some of whom have been in front of this project, marketing this project for quite a while now. So this project's finally out on the street to prospective engineering consultants, and we're beginning the process of having an on-site pre-proposal meeting and site walk, and answering questions, issuing any addenda that there might be. And we expect the schedule you see on your screen to be pretty accurate, where we will interview consultants at the end of August if required, and bring this back to the Engineering and Equipment Committee on the September 6th meeting. By that time, we will have a recommendation of award, and that recommendation of award for the PSA will go to the board on the September 15th meeting. At which time we will move forward with a notice to proceed. 6090 final design. We expect bid phase support services to occur at the end of summer next year, towards August, September of 2022. So that is moving forward. It's very good. This project is a big operational priority for the district, with the inherent hazard that chlorine gas brings at Meadowlark. That hazard will be behind us essentially with the completion of this job, and so far everything is moving in the right direction.
And I guess that's a good point. When the chlorine gas system was originally put in, it's a less costly system, but B, there were no houses around Meadowlark. Meadowlark was out there by itself, and now, as the board knows, as the committee knows, we're surrounded by homes, and chlorine gas is an inert hazard that requires not only a health and safety plan, but it could be a risk to not only employee but community lives. So getting rid of this hazard has been a top priority for our operations staff, and we've done it in other sites like our Twin Oaks site. And now it's the Meadowlark site. The Meadowlark site's just a lot bigger as far as a chlorine demand than Twin Oaks. So the budget for it also had to get approved. And, between recession and COVID, it got pushed off year after year. And now it's finally time to get this thing done.
So how much chlorine gas is currently stored typically on site?
Do we have two 1-ton cylinders or two 2-ton cylinders? I'm not, I know we have two, but they're either 1-ton or 2-ton cylinders. I can't remember.
There's more than 2 cylinders out there, or some.
No, that we use. We also have backup too.
Oh, okay.
So we rotate them in, yeah. So I think we either order 1 or 2-ton cylinders, and 2 of them are connected at all times, basically. And then we have a backup system for more.
Mhm.
So this gets rid of all chlorine gas at the site. There isn't
Yeah,
any other.
it becomes bulk storage sodium hypochlorite at 12.5%, basically bleach solution.
Right. No, that's good.
And that's not the only project going on at Meadowlark. As you'll see on the map, you've seen this map before. We have the Headworks auger replacement improvement project up here at the most upstream part of the plant. The aeration basins and bioselector project is ongoing. The tertiary structural improvements and coatings project is coming soon to be coming at Meadowlark. The conversion we just spoke about down here, the chlorine contact tank expansion has real potential to actually move forward. If we receive some grant funding this year, we'll know more about that later in the summer. And then odor scrubber number 1 replacement, that's also ongoing. So lots of work going on at the plant. And just to provide the committee an update on where we are with those miscellaneous projects, aeration basins and bioselector project is in construction. Crews are currently in demolition, which is ongoing. We do expect completion in November or December of this year. Headworks improvements is also in construction. Contractors beginning to stage out there and mobilize. Demolition will come first within the next couple weeks, and we expect that project will be completed around October this year. Odor scrubber number 1 replacement is going to go in tandem with Headworks. However, there's a materials shortage associated with the FRP fan of the odor scrubber. The backordered ship date is September 7th. So at the earliest, it'll be mobilizing and staging odor scrubber 1 at the end of September or October, with expected completion on that of November, December. And then lastly, the tertiary basins structural rehab and repairs project. We're just finalizing the bid documents now. We will advertise in August, and we expect completion on that project at the absolute latest by February of 2022. So there's a lot of activity and at Meadowlark. We've been working with contractors and cross coordination so that everyone's good neighbors and staging areas are not being encroached on by others. And we're also obviously working with our own staff out there at Meadowlark to make sure we're not getting in the way of normal operations. And that's what we will continue to do through active management all the way to the end of these projects. And that is the extent of capital facilities updates. If there are any questions, we can field those at this time.
Okay. Director Hernandez?
No, I'm good. I'm happy to see everything working towards completion.
Yeah, I've got a question. Do we usually get the same kind of group of contractors bidding on these types of jobs, or do you get a lot of variety?
We have a contractor list for contractors who are well-versed in treatment plant process work. We've actually worked with Encina on who they kind of prefer with some of their contractors who they've had good experiences with. So we've kind of molded our list around our own experiences and also our neighbors out there in the industry. We do have a separate list of contractors who go for our outside the fence work for, linear improvements.
Ryan, this is a open bid, right? So we're not selectively bidding most of these. These are open bid.
It's all open bid. It's all open bid.
And so you're correct. So there's in locally, when you go after these smaller treatment plant jobs, it's the same contractors. And then, there's ones that do bigger jobs at Encina, and they kind of rotate the same type of contractors do those jobs. And then there's a group of contractors that kind of do the smaller jobs. So
Yeah.
every now and then we'll get a variety. We'll get somebody from out of the area, and we always get a little nervous. But so far, knock on wood, it's worked out okay.
Yeah, I was thinking of the contractors of the size like Phelon that does
Yeah,
work for.
it's too small for
Encina.
Phelon.
Okay.
Yeah. Their small projects group won't touch anything less than $1 million, and that's their small projects group.
Yeah.
So I did convince Phelon once to do our tertiary piping, and that was only like $350,000, but it was right after the recession or during the recession, so they were slow. So
Nice. Okay.
all right, so that is it for the agenda. So back to you, Director Althorpe.
Okay. Other business, Director Hernandez, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Any public comment?
No, we did not receive any public comments 90 minutes prior, and we haven't had any public comments that I'm aware of. And there are two attendees, both signed off after the Sunrise Orcs. So I'm guessing they're both Sunrise Orcs attendees.
Okay. All right. I guess we're done then.
All right, then.
Great.
This meeting
Good
is
day.
adjourned.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
so much.
Everybody.